The top 10 mistakes physicians make. Apparently, we kind of got a thing going here with top 10 mistakes. Oh boy, watch out. Yeah. Mistake number one, delayed financial planning. One of the challenges that physicians have is that they work a lot. They study for a long time, and it takes a number of years for them to ultimately become licensed and eligible to do the work they do. As undergraduate, medical school, residency, potentially fellowship, it's a number of years before you're finally making any earnings. And the drawback or the challenge with that from a financial planning perspective is that there hasn't really been any earnings taking place in your situation and no savings taking place for a while either. And so there gets to be something of what might call the big squeeze that happens where it's a lot of work before you can finally become eligible to make money. And compared to maybe others in society who perhaps even as early as graduating from high school started to earn money and perhaps even save, we've got perhaps as long as 10, 12 years before any money has been made. And so what we can have is that there's just been this large delay in financial planning. And now we're finally, because of the schooling, and now we're finally able to go and make some money. And instead of maybe turning immediately to financial planning and taking care of things and getting your house in order, you kind of want to live it up and enjoy your money for a little bit. You've been working all these years to have the money that you have. And so one of the biggest mistakes that a physician can make is that we just continue that delay of financial planning and continue to delay financial literacy. Mistake number two is, thankfully, on average, physicians make quite a bit of money. Some of the research out there is even though the physicians make quite a bit of money, they're behind on their retirement savings. Some of this has to do with the big squeeze, where it's a delay in earnings before you make it, and then there's only so much time in which you have to be able to generate those earnings due to an aging skill set that we're competing against. Can be an issue of just relying too much on your income. The fact that it is a high income and not really identifying or realizing that income has limitations and is only good for so long. Income has limits, like dollar amounts. As large as these salaries are, there still is only so much money. And unfortunately, the more income that you make in our given tax structure, the more that is subject to taxation. And so it seems nominally stated like a really large amount of money that's being granted. And if you've been delaying a long time to make this money, it's a sudden windfall of sorts. Like, oh my gosh, here we are, we're making all this money. It feels almost endless, right? The money is endless. And like, that's the mistake, is thinking that the money is now endless and I can just spend as I want. Like we're in the money. We've made it, baby. Like we're here. You're like, all this hard work has paid off. And now, let's live it up. Let's have a great time. The problem is that money isn't endless, and it, as much as you have made it, it doesn't go forever, and you can get yourself into, a lot of trouble. Another mistake that can happen is we could call it lifestyle inflation. It's probably better described as lifestyle creep. And we all experience this regardless, but it's, as more money comes into a situation, naturally we want to enjoy that money and we want to, take advantage of it. We've worked hard for it. We want to see the fruits of our hard labor and have it actually materialize, not just in dollars showing up in our pay stubs or the checks coming home, so to say, but like it's showing up in like the things we can buy and the things we can do and what we're accomplishing. And so there's, a push for a bigger house or a nicer car, or those would be the big ones. Maybe eating out more, and we don't need to cook at home. That's unnecessary. It's too passe, and I definitely don't need to be bringing a lunch to work. A bag lunch, and practically, I realize, depending on the nature of your work, maybe bringing a bag lunch isn't a possibility. You'll have to eat, in the cafeteria at the hospital, as an example. But there's a sense of we can afford this endlessly. And so the lifestyle, this kind of goes on with like, oh, the income never ends, is that we want to stretch that money for as much as we can and get as much out of it as possible, and we overstretch. We take it too far. It's too much, and we overshoot what the money can do for us. And we get ourselves into a situation of too much house, too much car, Those tend to be the big ones. Those aren't the only ones. I mean, it could be too much cell phone, too much TV subscriptions, too much vacations. We're in a situation where we have too much, on our financial plate, and even though we have a really big income, and it's not enough to take care of it. Another mistake that can happen is just really not planning out that student loan obligations. Going to school, undergrad, graduate school, medical school, and then continue on with at least a reduced income throughout residency, and then at least not really being able to pay on those student loans. And then with a higher loan balance and a higher interest rate, seeing those student loans potentially increase rather substantially, sometimes double in the course of residency and fellowship. We have an issue where the student loans are a problem. And in some ways you had to stop thinking about, you had to just not think about the student loan debt because it probably freaked you out. You're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to all this school. And what happens if this doesn't work out? What am I going to do? What other options are available to me? I'm going to be straddled with this for the rest of my life. So I better just hit the books and be focused and do well in my tests and continue on. And we'll just push off. We'll push off. Let's not think about those student loans. That unfortunately, especially when financial literacy then at the same time isn't a dominant theme. Although I do think work is being done within medical schools to bring more financial literacy and strengthen physicians, medical students. The issue is that critically, there can be some time-sensitive decisions made on those student loans, especially in terms of who you might be working for as a resident and whether or not they would qualify for public service loan forgiveness. That if we continue to just push off, and we don't consider what the right course of action is, if we don't prioritize it at all, we may miss some important opportunities, milestones, turning points, pivot points that could drastically reduce the cost of that student loan debt. Not appreciating or understanding the value or importance of compound interest and how compounding works. And what I really love about compound interest when I got introduced to this concept, because I didn't know all this stuff either. I didn't come into this until after all of my schooling. My background is in philosophy. I wasn't studying financial matters during that. I might have studied philosophy of economics or the political philosophy or legal philosophy. I mean, there were things that I know today that from my philosophical studies have had their application, but no, we weren't looking to how to grow your money and become wealthy. That's not a philosophical question, to be honest with you. And so my pursuit of financial matters didn't really start to come about until after grad school, when I received some literacy in the matter. And one of the things that's been most impressive, it's just stood out in my mind about finances, that Albert Einstein is known for this quote that really captures it so well, is that compounding interest is like the eighth wonder of the known world. It's something of that nature that Albert had to say. It was like, this is just unbelievable. It's like one of the greatest human inventions that we have. The idea, what is compounding? It's the idea that I can take some money and it can make money for me without me doing additional work for that money to be made. And then that money, which made money for me, makes more money. And that more money, along with the more money that was already made with the original money, keeps working and making more and more and more and more. And it builds, it compounds. That's where it comes from. Compounds on itself. Poor investment strategies, huh? What the heck? I think, unfortunately for physicians, because again, there's a lack of literacy, and then of financial literacy, and then everyone's kind of knocking on their door and everyone wants their hand in your pocket, to be quite honest. You really become, unfortunately, I think, the prey to schemes, to ideas, to possibilities of some fancy things, and what I mean by fancy things is like these investment ideas that just seem great. They have a lot of sizzle, which, FYI, they have to have a lot of sizzle. No one else would get into them if they didn't. You can get duped, I think, is unfortunately the issue. Or, if you haven't studied a lot of financial matters, I think you don't fully appreciate the relationship between risk and reward, and that the marketplace is highly competitive, and that everyone is really after easy money, which makes it very difficult to have any easy money because everyone's competing for it. And so, if anyone starts to sell you on some really great investment that has awesome returns and it's going to blow your socks off and you're going to love it because you're going to make so much money, moolah, 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 you can buy into that. you can buy into it because, quite frankly, it feels good. We want to believe it. We want to buy into it. Like, who doesn't want to hear like, oh, I was a great genius to go, make all my money on this investment? And then, that greediness, matched with naivete and poor education. Physicians are smart. You wouldn't be a physician if if you if you weren't. I mean, I don't know. Maybe you would disagree with that. Perhaps you've come across a few doctors who aren't the brightest. I'm sure every industry or profession has this, but for the most part, look, I mean, if you made it all the way through undergrad and medical school and residency and fellowship, like you've got some brain power. After many years of working in financial services, I got to tell you, one of the things that I've learned and just it's become a very deep conviction in me is that, you know, if it's too good to be true, it's too good to be true. And, don't buy into these investment schemes. Like if a return really is as great as it is, uh, that return may happen, but at the same time, you have to know for sure is that there's going to be a lot of risk with that, and it's not guaranteed. And it could just as well go negatively as it could go positively. Uh, and maybe the return's possible, but they might have undersold you on the risk you've taken, and you got to at least weigh that risk as well. Now, the thing that can be easily woefully missed, and really, like if there was a need for it, like statistically it's even all the more higher, is disability insurance. And that, disability is this notion of life is really straightforward. It's like, well, if you die and you're not here anymore, then the insurance pays out. And the reason why you would want that is because we have loved ones behind, and we want to make sure that they're provided and taken care of and aren't put in an upheaval at the loss of someone out of the home. But with disability insurance, we just kind of presume it will always keep working. We don't appreciate our feebleness, if you will, the possibility that we may become sick. And not that we're just sick for a little bit of time or for a little while, but we're like sick for a long time. Maybe it's cancer or an injury or some sort of a bug bite. You hear all these sort of things that people get hit with. Perhaps you would this better than I do as a physician, right? That sort of thing can just wipe you out, and you're not just sick for a little while. You're sick for a long term. You're maybe now sick permanently. And then there's like, well, what previously you were able to work, but you're not able to work anymore. So what are you doing? Like, how are you going to bring money in to your situation? And so, physicians, again, they can have really robust and great incomes, and those incomes can be life-changing, that, revolutionize your finances, especially if they're well managed, well taken care of. But, that income can be lost. It can go away, and then you don't have it anymore. And then it's a question of what do you do? And more so, maybe what does your family do? Another mistake that we see physicians make at sometimes is just appreciating their marginal tax rates. And that, for every dollar that you make, it's getting taxed at a certain rate, both at the federal and the state level. And if you're on the highest of tax rates, that could be 37% on the federal level. Currently, it was previously 39.5 or a quarter. I don't quite remember. And other times, marginal tax rates have been high, if you believe this, as high as 70 to 80, 90%. So, I mean, the current marginal rates really aren't that bad. I hate to say that, but truly, 37%, 39% high, definitely taking a big chunk out of it, but it's not 80, it's not 90%. But then you also have the state rates, and then maybe some locality rates too that are, add on to that. And the state rates, anywhere between you have some states that don't have any income taxes, and then you have others that, it's as much as 10 to 11%. And then maybe you get some dividend taxation. It would all depend on the localities, but there are other levels of taxation that takes place. And so, I think what can happen, the problem with a physician is, look, you have a lot of money, and that's a great thing, and you've got a lot of income. Again, that's a great thing. But in our situation, that higher income gets taxed quite a bit. And if you're federal or state withholding, and tends to be more of a federal issue. If your federal withholding is not enough to be taken out on your paychecks, you can come around to tax season and get your filing done and find out that you owe a lot of money. And I mean by a lot of money, I'm not talking like a couple thousand or 5,000 or even $10,000. I mean, we're talking like 20 to even 50 grand. I mean, we've seen some folks have a huge surprise. But I mean, it goes really actually both ways, because as much as we've seen people have like, oh, crud, I'm sorry to tell you this, but it looks like you owe a lot of money because your federal withholding was off and you didn't have enough set aside. You also have it where maybe too much is being set aside. And I mean, this is kind of good news. People don't really hate this news, but hey, you're getting a $50,000 refund. People are like, hey, that's great. They start to think I'm a genius, or my team's a genius, right? But that's not what's going on. We're not geniuses. It's really simple. You set too much money aside over the course of your working period, and now it's coming back to you as a large refund. And so getting that adjusted, and just like knowing what you should be setting aside in taxes is definitely an easy mistake. Low hanging fruit. No need to have those surprises, good or bad. As far as I'm concerned, you don't want a really big refund. You don't want to obviously owe a whole bunch. Like, let's have it adjusted. Definitely something we can do for you. Another thing that physicians can do is an emergency fund. And, what do I mean by that? An emergency fund, it kind of explains itself, is this notion that we have enough money set aside to cover us in case something happens. Sometimes the way I'd like to describe this is, if you had an unexpected bill come due and you had to be paid in, let's say, as early as a week, how big of a bill could you handle before that would become a huge like, I don't know what we're going to do, we're in trouble kind of a bill? I mean, would $500 be it? Would it be $1,000? Would it be $5,000? Would it be $10,000? Could it be as high as 20 or 30? Like, how high of a bill could suddenly show up? And I'm not saying you like it, because no one likes this sort of thing. Like, no one wants to see themselves owe a bunch of money. So this is not about you liking it. It's about how big could it be, and you're okay. That's an emergency fund in a nutshell. And we think you should have usually somewhere between 3 to 6 months of an emergency fund, 3 to 6 months of living expenses. What do we mean by that? That's being able to cover your mortgage or your car payments, your student loan payments, cover your food costs, cover, subscription services, perhaps, cell phones, any number of things, like your core expenses. Like, even if you pulled the belt really tight, like, well, I can only pull it so tight. Like, I still need, need some money coming in. I can't bring my expenses down to zero. Like, I got to eat, right? So, like, it's 3 to 6 months of whatever those expenses are is what you should have set aside. And that depends on your situation. That tends to be probably around 25,000 for most people. I think if you're a physician, though, 35 to 50,000 is not outside the norm. And to be honest, especially if you're really of a higher income earner, and we have, quite a bit higher in terms of housing costs, which tends, we tend to see the two of those go hand in hand, then, $75 to even $100,000 in an emergency fund is what's needed. Just because, we see and have folks in which their mortgage payment alone is 20 grand a month, right? So 3 months of just the mortgage payment, we're at 60 grand, right? So, obviously 100,000 is kind of a minimum in that sort of situation of what you need to be covered. Another one is estate planning. That's definitely a mistake that folks make. And physicians aren't alone with this, but what the heck? I mean, physicians aren't unlike. And this is an issue of just having clear guidance on what to do with your money and your assets and the care of your loved ones, especially your children, if you were to pass. And we kind of just presume, if you're married and we've got, two spouses collaborating and working together, that we're just always going to be around, and you're going to watch your families. We're all going to grow old together and watch them grow up. And I sure hope that's what happens for you, to be honest. Like, why I wouldn't wish that for anyone else to be any different from that. I mean, I want all of us to be able to grow old together with their families. I sure hope that for my family, for my wife, and ultimately for my daughters. But the truth is that's not what's going to happen for all of us. Some of us are, going to see someone who passes away unexpectedly. Could see, a divorce, and then a change in assets. One of the biggest risks that you face for anybody, financially, is the divorce, where there's good chance you could lose as much as 50% of what you've accumulated and earned for yourself. Now, 50% is considered the norm, but the real divorce proceedings and language is what's equitable. And again, equitable tends to be like, well, 50-50. Who's going to disagree with that? I mean, that's as equitable as equitable gets, but equitable doesn't necessarily mean 50-50, but not uncommonly. That's kind of what happens. So, I mean, we have divorce issues, but we have also, we have planning for how the assets gets passed on, whether it's, house or car, or bank account or taxable brokerage account. We have potential issues of taxation occurring at the point of death. If we were to be looking at, a simultaneous death, either if you're not married or you both were to die and, unfortunately simultaneous death take place. Estate planning is thinking ahead about these points, this transition point of death, and making sure that we're ready for it. One, that if I pass away or my spouse passes away or both of us passes away, that we have a plan in place for what happens to the money. Then just as important, maybe more important really, is we know what happens for our kids. Who's going to take care of them, especially if we have an issue of a simultaneous death. And, I have in my own life, unfortunately, the experience of seeing a friend with a simultaneous death with his wife and some young kids in the house. And, it was a car wreck, and, mom and dad didn't come back home that day. And that's not an easy thing to have happen. So, but, it may not be a simultaneous death. Maybe it's just an incapacitation, which, still is a big deal. But like, there becomes issues of, what to do with not just your belongings, your property, but maybe what to do with your medical care, and who should be responsible for making decisions on that, especially if maybe there's going to be family who would disagree, which, family disagree. So, I mean, should expect that there would be disagreement on what the right medical care is for you. And if you can't make that decision any longer, who is going to make that decision for you? Who do you want making that decision for you? Okay. Well, folks, hey, thanks for watching. As physicians, you guys work hard for your money. I know that, guys and gals. Don't want to be sexist here, but you guys work hard. You have worked hard. I mean, going to school, not an easy thing. I love school, but I've also, I've been put through, the paces, in school too. And, as a physician, you went through it a long time. And so you finally have seen success. But, even once you get into your careers, a lot of times your line of work isn't easy. It's demanding, it's challenging. It's it's tough. There's a reason why you are earning the income that you're earning. This goes back to some of what I was saying. And so just want to say, hey, thanks for listening. Hope you're finding these videos to be helpful and you took away a few nuggets from here. And if either I or my team can be of help with you, let's have you reach out, click the link below. Check out Bonafide Finance, our financial planning company. We have also got Marginal Tax Experts, our tax planning business. We created these things to be of help for folks just like you. And so that's what we want to do. Like, that's why we created these, was to help you make good financial decisions and, to avoid some of these mistakes. So please reach out. Thank you. Oh, I forgot to mention that, hey, if you do schedule with Bonafide, you can schedule a 40-minute intro call consultation. We'll meet with you and see if we're a good fit and be of help. We love working with our clients. We're good working with our clients. Our clients love us. We do everything we can to get things right. And then when we don't get things right, we do what we can to make things right. But we do good work, and I think you're going to really enjoy and appreciate working with us too.